And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ray Andrewson. I'm the Executive Director of the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce, affiliate Chamber of Commerce of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our one of our series of developing small business webinars. We hope to bring these webinars to you related to topics to help your small business grow and also to help you prepare for some of the challenges and changes in our contemporary business environment. We'll be joined today by some excellent guests who are going to be providing information on energy assistance, programs, ways to save costs, cut down your costs, and streamline your costs as we enter into what might be a challenging winter ahead for energy as we embark on 2023. Can't think of three better people to discuss this in a much more extended way. Joining us from United Illuminating and Avangrid. We will be joined here by Gary Lane, who's an energy engineer who has a lot of information on cost savings and programs for you. Gary, welcome. It's good to have you here on this webinar.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you as well. Ryan Wolf, too, is a Government Affairs Economic Community Development Specialist for United Illuminating. Ryan's also one of our panelists. Ryan, thank you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And also Crystal LaHaye, she is President Globele Energy in cooperation with the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We have programming for you with Globele Energy, ways to cut your costs. Crystal, it's always good to have you here. So I'm going to start right now, and I'm going to start our first question, I think, with you, Gary, because we're going to talk a little bit about how we can really help small business in our discussion. And we're going to welcome in your comments for anyone who's here watching this. Put your comments in the chat, but we're going to ask you to wait a little bit if you don't mind. So about 25, 30 minutes in, we'll be responding to your questions at the back end of this program. We'll have our Q&A the final 15, 20 minutes today when we're joined here. So Gary, I want to talk about the myriad of programs that we have, where we're at today in terms of energy savings, but in your role as an energy engineer, you're on it. Describe what you do and how you get the word out to people and how they can cut costs.
Well, Ray, thanks. For small business, we have a very robust program, and it's for customers. And I don't want to get into the kind of the details of my little world, but for customers that their average demand is under 200 kW. And there's a lot of customers in that category, but we have over 30 contractors that are vetted in this program that help us with our customers. They'll go into the account for the customer, and they're able to help look at all types of energy conservation measures, from lighting to heating and air conditioning. We're doing a lot now with weatherization, and especially now with the heating season, and there's a lot of opportunity, low cost measures as well. And the key to it is for the client and the customer is try to make the payback as quickly as possible and make it as painless as possible. We do offer zero financing on the electric bill. We try to make the projects cash neutral. And some of the larger accounts like Globele, that Crystal Lee would work on, we have programs for municipal financing, as well as some other outside financing, but a lot of programs. But right now, I would think with the heating season, I'd see if people are interested in any type of weatherization. It's migrated where we're very successful in the residential programs, and now we're seeing it more in the business programs, from insulation, from weather stripping, attic installation, all types of different types of measures, even air infiltration. We're getting it to even some duct sealing as well. So it's really my attitude really is just get in touch with us. My contact information is available. We could guide you. Thank you.
Good. We're gonna drill down into some of the details with you a little bit later on, some of the programs as well. But I want to sort of bring in Ryan and Crystal to the conversation. Ryan, I'm going to talk from because your role at UI is clear about it's Hartford, and it's external to the New Haven area and businesses that are on this webinar today, but also community development, outreach, making sure we get the word out. The one thing that I keep hearing, and I'm sure that everyone in business life hears, is how do we get here? I mean, how did we get to a point where we're concerned about this? Someone said it's like I should bring out my leisure suit. I feel like I'm reliving the 1970s. Uh, is it to that extent? Is it that challenging for us?
So, well, thanks for having me. Yes, it is challenging. Energy is extremely complicated and it's hard to summarize in a couple minutes, but I'll try and break it down in a couple sections. On your bill, you have two main sections. You have the delivery and you have the generation, the supply side. And let's talk about the delivery first. That's what we do at UI. We're a delivery company. All we do is deliver electricity from the power plants to the customer. We're like the FedEx of the world, I guess you could say. And then you have the supply side. And the supply side, we're seeing a lot of challenges right now. And in our business, Connecticut and most of the Northeast is deregulated, which means UI does not own any generation plants. We do not produce any power. We buy it on the open market and then we sell it to you at no profit or markup. And so, the state as an entity and through regulations have very little control of the supply side. And, many of you have probably seen that the standard offer price went up almost 100% or will go up almost 100% January 1. And there's a lot of factors in that. And a lot of that has to do with what's going on in Europe, lack of natural gas supply, that nature. But in general, the Northeast is at a severe disadvantage because we don't have any fuel locally to supply our generation plants. Everything is brought in via pipeline or, renewable generation or something like that. And we also have very aggressive clean energy goals. Which at the moment is a little bit more expensive than, let's say, burning coal or oil, which none of us want to do. So the Northeast is at a severe disadvantage because of that. But there are some good things on the horizon. Offshore wind over the next decade is going to be a huge development for the Northeast. Many are calling it the off the coast of New England, the Saudi Arabia of wind, because the conditions are just perfect with high capacity factor for wind as well as favorable conditions to build it. So there's some hope on the horizon, but it's really getting us to that point that's going to be really difficult. On the delivery side, you have challenges that, the Northeast was the first, developed part of this country. So our aging infrastructure needs to be upgraded over the course of the last, 10, 15, 20 years and going forward. So you're seeing all those sort of infrastructure improvements that need to be done, and those cost money, unfortunately. You're going to see other parts of this country deal with the same issues in the next couple of decades as their infrastructure starts to age and needs upgrade as well. So unfortunately for the Northeast, we're at a severe disadvantage when it comes to our location and our aging infrastructure. But the investments we make now will pay off in the future.
It's remarkable too that we think about United Illuminating back in the day of 80 kilowatt, and I'm just trying to take this through sort of a timeline. It was a lot simpler. Now we have more complexity, we have more service, we have more ways to examine how to cut your costs, how to provide energy, what the delivery system is. You mentioned UI as a delivery system. Crystal Lee LaHaye, I want to bring you into the conversation, Crystal Lee, a little bit about delivery and capacity and Globele energy too. We aren't really informed with one company, one utility, one space now. It is about platforms delivery. Explain a little bit about what Globele does and sort of the changes and transformation in the energy world, if you will, in the last couple of decades. You'll need to unmute though. We'll need to have you get rid of that red microphone.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Ray.
Welcome. Yes.
So I'd be happy to talk about this. I think that, as Ryan said, there's some misconception about where the energy is purchased, who delivers it. If I choose an alternative supplier, does that mean that I'm not going to be able to get some of these financing options or funds per se? And the answer is just no. You can purchase your electricity from wherever, whatever supplier you would like, and then also still tap into the fund because, as Ryan said, they're the delivery. Power goes out, you call UI or Eversource. So, but there's some things that, so let me back up a second. Globele works with many mid to large size C&I customers as an outsourced energy manager. And we deal with everything from procurement of electricity, natural gas, to funding a solar array and, working with the ZREC program, all the energy efficiency programs, anything that really has to do with energy would fall into our purview. So, but I just think it's important to know customers are seeing now this severe increase in pricing. this is no one's fault. It's not the utility's fault. It's not, it's the result of 6 things: exports, demand, volatility of weather, storage, and production here in the US. So since the war in oh my gosh, since the war started in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, that's right.
Yes. So since that started or began, we had 2 export contracts for liquid natural gas from the US to Europe. We now have 20 since the war started. So we are being called upon globally to export natural gas because our natural gas is cheaper than it is in Europe. It's literally, $4 as opposed to $40. So it is a very gross net back profit to the producers. So that is actually one of the main drivers, in addition to weather, which we haven't seen yet. But concerning is the supply. Is it going to get better? I don't know, but it's important to look at. You can stay with the utility. You can, shop around, especially as a small business. I just urge you to watch the rates. Some of the companies, you just want to be careful that they don't pull out of the market and your fixed rate is then forfeited, or you're put onto a holdover rate because your contract expired and the bookkeeper didn't notice, what have you. So it is a very viable solution, but there are some nuances that you need to be careful of. And coupled with that is the plans going forward for your business. If you are going to go into, get a solar array or upgrade your lighting, you want to make sure you have the same people aware of all of those things. So the contract language, you don't want to get caught up in contract language where if you put a solar array on, you're then liable for the electricity that you purchase from the supplier that you're now producing yourself. So it's best to have somebody who does an all-encompassing approach where it's, supply, demand, delivery, efficiency, and can give you really a comprehensive solution for your business.
Well, it's interesting. And you mentioned, remembering the war, there's so many conflicts, and obviously there's a complexity in that, as there is with energy delivery too. But I'm going to sort of circle back to Connecticut, and Gary, we're going to get into some of the practical considerations and programs for small business as well. But I think we're setting the table with why are we here in this discussion today. So Ryan, let's talk about just your work a little bit in terms of government affairs. It's a regulated industry, so when we're talking about regulations, that means that lawmakers have a role in this. Do you find that most of the lawmakers that you engage with really do have a good grasp of the complexity of this issue?
Well, that's a loaded question.
It's from the airport.
Well, first, let's clarify one thing. Half of it is regulated. So the delivery portion of the bill is regulated. So every dollar that we spend is overseen by PURA, our regulator. We are, anytime anybody can go into a PURA docket and look at how much are we spending on trucks and how much are we spending on salary and all of that. And that's performed, every 4 years or so in a rate case where we sort of say, this is how much money we think we need to run the system. And they'll look at it and say, yes, no, maybe, and decide how much we get to charge in our rates. So we do not get to charge. We do not get to decide what we charge for the delivery portion of the bill. That is decided by PURA. What I will say is on the other side, the supply side is unregulated. So when they talk about deregulation, which happened in the late 90s, they forced the utilities to sell all of their power plants and created this marketplace. And the idea at the time was that customers would have so many choices in the marketplace to determine who they would purchase their power from. We would always deliver it, but who would generate it for them, essentially. And there was a thought that, we wouldn't even need to offer a standard service product after the first couple of years. And currently 83% of our customers are on standard service because the marketplace really hasn't developed to a point on the residential side, I should clarify, for that. So when you get to talking to legislators and policymakers, a lot of what I do is education, right? Educating on exactly what I just talked about, right? Two parts of the bill: supply side, delivery side, what's regulated, what's not regulated, what they can do. And unfortunately at the legislature, there's elections every 2 years, there's constant changeover. So it's a re-education process. And this stuff is very, very dense and very, very complicated. So you need, a handful of folks that are going to really dig in and do that. And, we, hold meetings all the time. We bring in our experts, we talk to everybody. But one of the biggest challenges our policymakers make is that, Connecticut is a small state, and we're part of what's called ISO New England, right? So our grid is all the New England states combined. So they have limited control or power over really the supply side of the bill, because that's managed at a regional level. And so our regulations, our laws really don't impact that at all. And so we really depend on, the other states coming together, and everyone has different priorities, and it's very difficult to sort of come up with a cogent strategy to deal with some of these issues. And everyone's sort of pointing at each other saying, who's in charge of this part of the bill, and especially the problem we're seeing right now. So a lot of that is talk about things we can control, things we can't control, and how we sort of work with other states to address some of these issues.
Yeah, well, that complexity related to other states, other legislatures too, and other needs. Connecticut seems to have extraordinarily high costs, comparatively speaking. So Crystal Lee, from your perspective, when you compare the rest of the country, we're talking about delivery systems. Connecticut seems to be here in that regard. Is it because of our weather? I'm sure it's factors like weather. Sure, it has to do with just, delivery, whether it's oil, whether it's electric, whether it's natural gas. Connecticut sort of developed into this situation over a period of time. It just didn't emerge in the last 10 years.
Yeah, to some degree. So I believe Connecticut is always highest in energy costs behind Hawaii and California. To some degree, I feel like because we're known to be that, we keep perpetuating that. But there's reasons for that. There's, the lack of capacity and infrastructure for our pipelines. And as we have transitioned out of coal and dirtier fuels for our power plants and moved into using more natural gas costs have gone up. And then there's been, like I said, the call from, globally for us to export. So that is what's making our situation a little bit unique, I believe. The weather, that really pertains to all New England states, right? But every utility is run differently. Every utility has different tariffs. But for here in Connecticut, it really is a matter of us not having enough pipeline capacity for natural gas. And then also we're exporting that natural gas. And about 50% of our electricity is produced by natural gas. So that's really that's the crux of the problem.
Yeah. I would also add that, when you compare us to other states, you got to take a couple things into consideration. One, let's look at what the fuel mix is, what they're burning in other states. We could lower our rates tomorrow if we started burning coal and things like that, right? And nobody in New England wants to do that. So that's not really an option that we would consider here, where they're doing that in other parts of the country, in the Midwest and South. And let's also talk about the fact that, unfortunately, when you talk about Connecticut being the third highest, if you look at the top 10, all the New England states are usually in there. So we're not unique in the sense that it's just Connecticut and Massachusetts and everyone else is, in the 20s or 30s. They're usually in the top 10 as well. But you have to also remember too, unfortunately, New England is a high cost area to do business in anything. So, a big input into our costs are property taxes, right? We are the highest property taxpayer in most of the municipalities that we operate in, because we pay property tax on every piece of pole and wire, substation. So, that's an input that has to get taken advantage too. But also, land is more expensive here. Employees are more expensive here. So unfortunately, New England is a high cost state. And, we like to say in our business, we're not going anywhere. We can't leave. We can't decide to pick up and move offshore or to a cheaper part of the country to do our business, because our customers are here, will always be here. Whereas other businesses will go areas where they can do things cheaper. So, unfortunately, New England being a high cost state just adds, it gets all folded into the rates.
And weather plays a role in this. I imagine our unstable weather. We have tornadoes. We do get tropical storms. We get ice storms.
Yep.
It seems like we do have this kind of disruption as well in this region.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple factors there. One, storms play a role, but there's storms everywhere. I mean, if you look at California, you got wildfire issues. You can look at, the Gulf Coast states, you got hurricane issues. Midwest, you got tornado issues. So I think weather plays a role. I think that the expectation of reliability has increased dramatically in the Northeast over the last 10 or 15 years. We see surveys that show, so New England or UI has one of the best blue sky outage reports in the country, which basically means absent of a storm, our outages are extremely low. We're in the top 10% in the country. And so, what that's done is provided people this expectation of reliability that maybe 20 or 30 years ago, people didn't expect. People expected their power to go out a lot often and accepted that. And now that's not accepted. So the perception that our reliability is down because of weather or things like that is, expectations have been increased dramatically. And so, weather plays a role into the cost, and we've had some costly storms, but also the expectation of how quickly regulators and legislators want us to get people online also adds to the cost. So we have very strict criteria of how quickly we need to get people back online, and that costs money. And I'll give you an example. I think it was last year, they were predicting a hurricane coming up the coast, and they didn't know if it was going to hit us or not. Well, in order for us to get mutual aid crews here from other parts of the country, one, we can't really get people from surrounding states because they're all staying put to make sure that if the storm hits their state, they're used. So we're getting people to come from Canada, Ohio, Midwest, Texas, and you got to start that process a week ahead of time. So you have, you're paying for crews to come here a week ahead of time when you don't even know if the storm is going to hit. And so the storm might not hit. And we had one last year where the storm didn't hit. We had very few outages. We didn't need all those crews, and they turned around and went back home. Well, that adds the cost. But that's the expectation that legislators and our regulators expect. So we need to prepare for that. But unfortunately, we're going to be caught in situations where we pay for something we didn't need. So in that sense, storms play a role because the expectations are extremely high for us to get people back online as quickly as possible.
Strategic planning, ongoing planning, it's all, it's events driven and things that are unexpected, but certainly over years you can chart what's ever expected, and that's where we are today. So we are here joined today talking about energy, and we're going to now pivot a little bit and talk about how to get your business prepared as we enter into the winter months, making sure that you have energy efficiency in your plant, that your physical plant in your building for your business makes a lot of sense. Lowering those costs, programs that are available to you as well. We're talking here with Gary Lane, who's an energy engineer with United Illuminating, Ryan Wolf, who's a government affairs, economic community development specialist with UI, and also Crystal E. LaHaye, who's the president of Globele Energy. And we'll welcome your comments in the chat in about another 15, 20 minutes from now. Gary Lane, I want to bring you back into our conversation a little bit and talk about preparation. It's December. It's not too late to get prepared, but let's talk about some of the simple things that a business that may have perhaps 1,000 square feet of an office or a small retail operation, a restaurant, what they can do right now to easily prepare for this coming winter.
Well, first of all, I commend anyone that's in their own business nowadays. Between labor and all these costs, it's very difficult. So I totally understand. And so you have to it is all about strategy and how you use your dollars and spend them. And I'll be quite honest with you, if you're, do you own the building? How long do you expect to be there? It plays a major role to make some major capital improvements, but some low cost, as Ray, you're alluding to, there's things as simple as even changing your faucet aerators and showers and just little things like that could help. And as I was talking to before, just weather stripping and air infiltration, there's some simple things, especially now with heating. Everything's so expensive, and just go after some of those low cost measures. But my whole thing with everything, and especially with my large customers, is have a plan. And sit with an expert. Maybe your electrician is very good at this. Globele, they're fabulous. There's contractors out there that understand our programs. I evaluate. I can't recommend. I can't do like I did in my past life. but there's so many things but you really want to have a game plan. And because you don't want to get into a situation where you have some 10-year project or payback project, and you're going to be in the building for 5 years or have a 5-year lease. So I think it's important to look at your situation, definitely always look at some of the low cost measures, and then evaluate, because there's so many things, and we have very, very good programs for if you're still heating with gas boilers. Now the big push is heat pumps. The incentives are going up dramatically in the next few years. But before that, it's almost like solar. Early on, before you could even do a solar project, you had to do a home energy assessment and tighten up your building and tighten up your home. And that's what we're promoting now, is that you want to have a tight building. So when you size up this like heat pumps or other equipment, you're not oversizing it. So you're putting in the right equipment. So it really is, it's all about planning, getting the right person in there and taking advantage of the programs. And there's some really good people out there that are masters at maximizing the incentives from a 40% incentive to a 65%, just by adding additional measures. And it's an art. And but there's a real big opportunity. We have and these dollars, it's not our dollars. It's from I think right now it's 3 or 4 mills. Mill is 1/10 of a cent, and it goes into this general fund, and it's your money. Take advantage of it. There's people, you've been paying into this for years. Take advantage of it. Call us, and we'll help you.
Because we're in New England and Connecticut, we have an older building stock. And a lot of our properties even date back 100, some cases almost 200 years. And how does that factor into energy efficiency evaluation, Gary? Because, a good example, do you have plate glass windows versus tempered glass? Do you have, insulation that maybe if you have a small office existing in a building that was built in 1910, maybe you don't have the proper insulation in your building. I mean, there's so many other things that you have to consider, and there are programs to help you correct some of this.
Absolutely. What I'm also, and I didn't kind of get it, what I do is I work with UI customers, Southern Connecticut gas customers, Connecticut natural gas customers, and Berkshire Gas. So I have an advantage where I'm doing a lot in Massachusetts, which is, I don't want to insult anyone here, Ryan, but Mass is, they're number 2 in the country. They have $1 billion in their fund, and we kind of follow suit. And so there's a lot of opportunities now getting into with weatherization, even in stick-built buildings. We're struggling a little in some other types of buildings, but this is morphing into weatherization is a big part of it. And again, just to get folks in to look at your building and get another set of eyes instead of waiting for something to break. There might be something that you could retire earlier on. But I really think it's key that, there's just not one fix. I think I look at it as a business, and you want to have a long-term plan.
If I could project really quickly, sorry.
Absolutely.
As along the lines of what Gary just said, you're paying into this fund, take the money out, take advantage of the programs, but this is not going anywhere. So having a plan is very important. Places like Boston, New York City, Washington, D.C., Chicago, they have ordinances in place for all these old buildings where they have to get an audit done. They have to commit to decreasing their CO2 emissions. And it's a real thing. And it's happening there, but it's only going to, bleed into our, especially New Haven. It's not far, I don't believe, from being a real thing here, where they're going to say, okay, you have to do benchmarking, and then you have to commit to XYZ project, and you have to do it by 2030 or what have you. So I just wanted to expand on that.
Krista Lee, do you agree though, as Ray said, it is an older stock of buildings. We do have a lot of older facilities. So there's so much opportunity. I totally agree with that.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you all in this case, what you've heard in terms of feedback in your line of work. What are the major misconceptions And Crystal, I'll start with you and work towards Ryan and Gary with this. What are sort of in terms of feedback, the misconceptions, I guess you could say, the points within your line of work that you find maybe a little frustrating, that you're struggling, the messaging is tough and people aren't just getting it. So what do you really wish people would get about preparing for these energy costs and making this incorporated into their business strategy?
So one of the biggest struggles that we have in our line of work is with regard to programs that UI or Eversource facilitate. You cannot wait till it breaks. You have to have them come in. The utility or myself has to come in, verify the equipment that's there before it's broken, because these are incentive programs, right? They want to incentivize you to upgrade to higher efficiency equipment. If you wait till it breaks, you're getting nothing. Sometimes you might get lucky and get a rebate. It's very minimal compared to what you could have gotten. And then the other thing is companies that get sold, and this is really where Globele really tries to shine, is protecting average consumers from salespeople. So from solar developers to lighting vendors, you might want to agree with what they say, and you might want to go that route. So you might want to do solar, or you might want to do an energy or a lighting upgrade. But with that, if you couple that with two other measures, there's something called a comprehensive bonus. So that is what we always try to achieve, is two or more measures. So, okay, you're interested in this lighting project. What else can we do? Can we do some weatherization? Can we do some insulation? Because that gives an added benefit and you get more bang for your buck, per se. So that is a challenge. I don't want to say misconception, but I guess I want to stress that you don't want to remove anything. You don't want to issue any POs. You don't want to wait till it breaks. You don't want to do any of that until you have either the utility or folks like ourselves, consultants, come in and assess your building.
Absolutely. Ryan.
Yeah, I would echo what you just said. I think, in my line of work, obviously I talk to legislators, policymakers all the time, but also I kind of troubleshoot any problems that they might be having or their constituents might be having. And unfortunately, I think in the last decade or so, you've had such a proliferation of, solar programs and things like this, that you've had a few bad actors in there. And I think they're weeded themselves out. But, all I can do is stress, do your homework, use a reputable firm, and talk to us. We've actually had municipalities sign contracts for distributed generation projects, and we're promised a certain return on that investment. And they come to us and say, hey, they're pointing at you saying you're doing something wrong. And we look at the contract, or we look at what they showed them, and it doesn't make any sense. And so, like anything, if you were going to redo your kitchen, you'd get a couple bids and you'd talk to people and you say, hey, is this a reputable company? Get referrals. Do the same thing in this business, because it's so complicated and people can throw out a lot of big words and a lot of complicated graphs. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, everyone has to be responsible, do their own homework. So get a couple bids, talk to multiple people, talk to your utility, especially on the business side, especially larger businesses. For UI, we have account managers that you can contact, and we'll look at stuff for you, because, we've had a personal story. A family friend of mine was selling solar door to door for a company that actually just went out of business because of this. And I said, give me your sales pitch. And she talked to me about it, and I was pretty shocked at some of the things they were saying. So, talk to multiple vendors, talk to multiple companies, and make sure you kind of do your homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan, kind of off of that too. I feel, what I tell people, and you're going to kind of maybe think this sounds silly, but you have a good doctor, you have a good lawyer, you should have a good energy guy. It's a big part of your business, and also, exactly, and also your home. I mean, you have your home, you may have another side business, your business, and it's critical to have that person. And as Crystal Lee, in my past life too, I had customers. I had the town of Stratford for 25 years. I did business with them. And it's just, they trust you like a Crystal Lee, and they'll come back to you and come back to you. You have to seek those people out, and there's not a lot of them. It is a small network. So I really advise to get, we have some good people. Start with us. we're not supposed to recommend, but we do have certain people that we use that are key and top in the field, and that's what you want. So we could guide you.
Great. Well, we've been talking about this from a perspective of smaller businesses. Naturally, we have large-scale employers. We have hospitals, universities. We have an Amazon distribution center in North Haven. We have major manufacturers, steel plants around here. So the big businesses know that this is a comprehensive part of their business. And I know, Crystal Lee, you all the areas I just touched on are important. So the big businesses, starting from that perspective, they've got their plans because they have to, and they're making decisions to employ hundreds, sometimes thousands of people because they have to incorporate the cost of energy into their business marketing, or I should say business strategic plan.
Absolutely. So I just want to say, with most of the larger clients that we work with, once they learn how to manage through the program, as we educate them, they will take the monies. So you have to spend the money and then you get the incentive. They take that money and then reinvest it in the next capital project. And that, I feel like, is really important, because if you're looking at a long-term strategy to maintain relevant in your business and manage costs and mitigate increases, you want to plan that next project. So, okay, we're going to get X amount of dollars from this project we just completed. What is our next capital investment going to be? And with the goal always being to conserve energy and to be more efficient. Eventually, we work with some clients where we're just like, oh, we can't help you anymore. You're as efficient as you possibly can be. And that does happen.
Chris, you make a wonderful point, because right now I'm working with Quinnipiac College, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking those dollars and they're reinvesting it. And it took years before that. It's weird. They haven't done much in the past, probably 8 to 10 years. And now they're getting into that flow, exactly what you're saying.
Well, that's where I went. So I'm glad to hear that. But that's my alma mater. So yeah, I mean, that's the idea. You learn how to tap into the program, and you keep doing so. And it becomes almost a regular practice across your business, especially with very large companies. I have point people from, one plant to the next that, okay, we're going to, look at these windows. Is there anything you can do? So anything energy related, they'll just kind of call us or tap into us as a resource and say, what is there out there for us for this particular project? So it becomes ingrained in your brain, right? That let's just see if there's any money for this. I mean, even down to elevator motors, we get that granular. So it is a mentality. And once you get that idea in your head and you see it work and you see it come to fruition and that check comes in, you're like, okay, I know how this works now. Let's do another project. And those are the clients that we love to work with. And I hope that many, many more Connecticut businesses take advantage of this fund, and they really should. They just, we're here really to teach them how.
Yeah, and a huge savings and a great part of their strategic plan and ongoing plan, their business plan too. Ryan, I was thinking Quinnipiac University does have a wind farm. So they were early on top of Rocky Top, taking advantage of the wind that we have here to harness in the Northeast. I want to go back and sort of pivot from the larger scale businesses to where we really are focused this day, and that is on small business. It's a matter of scale, but it's the same principles. So I would imagine, Gary, if I were going into a restaurant, you've got ovens, you've got refrigeration units, you've got ventilation units, you have lighting units, so on and so forth. So it's, as Crystal Lee just mentioned, it's step by step by step. You may even have an elevator. And you really should look at your entire physical plan, shouldn't you?
Absolutely. But even the small B, we have it down to a science. I mean, it's such a well-oiled program, and we usually even oversubscribe. So that, to me, is success. So I feel, and I don't, this isn't a platform for me to pontificate about what we should be doing, but middle market is really where we need more help. Small B, we're doing quite well. Anybody small B could immediately get somebody out there to do an assessment and take a look at the facility. But I really think there's a lot of middle market customers in Connecticut that are underserved. And that's where we need to kind of work towards. But I really think if there's anyone in a small business, the other thing too, that's kind of an issue, if you're leasing or renting, it's like, why should I bother? But we're trying to break through that now and getting to the renter or the leasing people. So we're really trying any way we can to really have full equality with everyone and just get the money spent across the board. So I think we're doing a good job, but I just feel bad if somebody doesn't know about the program, and we want to serve.
Well, speaking in the spirit of serving and our small businesses, they're watching this webinar and our discussion here today. I'm going to ask you, Ryan, in your role with government affairs community specialists, you need to hear from people who are here with us today. I mean, what would make your role and your work easier and more effective as an advocate on their behalf if they were to engage with you?
So I think one of the frustrating things at the Capitol, and before I came into this role, I worked at the Capitol as a policy staffer and on energy issues, is that if you ever seen a bill on the floor of the House or the Senate, and there is a tax or fee increase, that is a very lengthy discussion with a lot of opinions. And, we might debate a bill that has $1 million in fees for 12 hours. And then an energy bill will come up and it'll fly through with two people talking on it. And that might have impacted rates tens of millions of dollars. And I don't fault anyone for this because it's very complicated. It's hard to understand. But the legislature passes bills all the time that have severe ratepayer impacts. And I'm not saying these are all bad or wrong or bad policy, but it doesn't get the focus that maybe, as simple to understand tax increase does or a fee increase. And so, I think it's difficult, groups like CBIA, Chambers of Commerce, they do a good job of trying to identify these issues and try and bring it out to people. But, pay attention to what's going on in the legislature when it comes to energy issues. A lot of people don't realize that, in your bill somewhere, the percentages change all the time depending on the supply rate, but anywhere between 10 and 20% of your bill are public policy costs that are done to the legislature. And not saying those are all bad or not things that everybody would be in favor of, but that's a significant part of your bill. And so, it doesn't get the focus, I think, that other things do in state government. So I would say be aware, talk to CBIA, Chambers of Commerce, things like that, and say, when these bills come up and there is a ratepayer impact, how do you do this? But if you follow the legislature, every bill has what's called a fiscal note, and the fiscal note will say what is the cost to the state budget, and then taxpayers. We don't have that in energy bills. We don't have a ratepayer impact statement that shows, hey, this is going to increase rates this much or that much, and it'd be very difficult to do because it's complicated and it takes into a lot of factors. But there isn't that transparency really when it comes to energy issues.
Yeah. Well, I guess
just to expand on that. I'm sorry, Ray, go ahead.
No, just mention it.
I wanted to say, to expand on that, most people don't realize that in the Inflation Act that they passed, there's energy language. There's things that in the Inflation Act that affect energy, renewable energy, clean energy purchases. So these are the things that are kind of slid through that, Ryan speaks my language. We are big advocates here, trying to help the average consumer, not get these charges passed through to them that really are the form of taxes.
Mm-hmm.
They take the form of taxes. They're just not spoken about. So you'll see it on your bill, but you don't know how it got there. And that's how it got there. It's from it getting kind of slipped through the whatever bill is being passed at the time.
Yeah, there's on your electric bill, you'll see a couple criteria. It's called FMCC, things like that. And in there, if you broke down, there are something like 160 different items in there that contribute to that part of the bill. And listen, I work in this business. I couldn't even go through and explain them all. So it's very complicated.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you've had a comprehensive discussion here about why things are the way they are. I think people need to know the why. And of course, Gary, as well with the programs, we're providing the how-to. So what happens, I think, invariably is we'll have a discussion. I think we're all human. We all do this. We take notes. if we were to command action from our viewers here in this webinar, if you were to really exhort them to do something right now, what would that be? And Gary, I'm going to start with you because you really developed this sort of like on the small business programming side. So if you were to talk to somebody who's with you one-on-one, what would you tell them to do at this moment?
Well, I just get in touch with us and then we could send somebody out. I mean, the beautiful thing of it, it's structured so well, we could immediately get somebody out and do an assessment for nothing, for free. And that will get the ball rolling. So there's really there's no excuses and there's no fear because there's no commitment. You know, you're not committed and you learn, see, and then you make a decision. I think it's a great business move.
Moving forward, and Ryan too.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially in the current supply rate crisis that we're potentially in now for the next, at least 6 months and potentially a year or two, really look at third-party suppliers and see if that makes sense for you. Read the fine print, make sure you understand what you're signing up for, but try and handle things that you can control, and where you purchase your energy from is something you can control, especially larger businesses. And Crystal has better experience in this than I do. We offer something that's called last resort service. So essentially, if a larger customer does not pick their own supplier, we supply it for them. And our last resort service is unbelievably high because the way we procure it, it just doesn't make sense for us. It's not an efficient way to procure power. But as a utility, we need to make sure that everyone has a source, right? So if somebody does not pick somebody, we have to provide that. But the way we do it is not efficient because we don't have a big enough pool of people. And there are still, I don't remember the last check, but we still have a decent amount of companies that are on last resort service, and they're going to see a gigantic price increase. And we're contacting them and telling them, get out there, look at third-party suppliers. But as a medium to large business, there's really no reason why you shouldn't be picking your own supplier.
Yeah. And Crystal, what are your thoughts?
So I really appreciate that, Ryan, because I just to kind of back that up, a lot of medium or small business clients have a supplier and they don't even know it. So this is one of my biggest, if I had to alert the masses, you might be a new bookkeeper or, one of the old owners might have signed a contract long ago and you're paying, 14, 16, 20 cents a kilowatt hour because you were in contract in 2011 and you've been with the supplier this whole time because it just rolls over and then you're on what they call a holdover. So the savings are very real with third-party supply. They just have to be monitored and they have to be managed. So I would urge any small business or anyone that's on the call to look at their bill. And if it does not say UI or Eversource is your supplier, you need to call them right away and get into a fixed contract or return back to standard service. So, but in addition to that, I just want to leave folks with the idea that you want to affect both sides of your energy crisis, right? So, or your energy costs. You want to address the supply with third-party suppliers or staying with the utility. And you also want to address efficiency. So one doesn't help without the other, right? It helps, but you need a comprehensive plan. So you need to worry about the supply, but also worry about how can I decrease my usage? How can I become more efficient? How can I generate power? And that should be the order in which you approach it as well. Conservation, efficiency, and then generation. And it doesn't matter what size business you are, that's really the footsteps that you should follow, but it should be supply and efficiency together.
And of course, on the Globele website too, you have a program with the Greater New Haven Chamber at this moment where people can get that kind of information, right?
Yes, we do. So we're the premier energy partner, I guess, per se, of the chamber. And also, if you are a chamber member and you do become a client of Globele, we also do give a monetary donation to the chamber. So it's kind of a win-win-win. So just want to put that out there.
Good. And Ryan and Gary too, I know with Avangrid on both sides, and whether it's all the utilities in terms of United Illuminating as well, you've been engaged with many small businesses who want that information as well. So right on the website, you've got those programs. So Gary, you can actually sign up right online.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're trying to, again, make it simple as possible. We have a great website. And again, if there's any, Ray, I'm sure my name is going to be available. People could contact me and I could get them. And I mean, we're not talking hundreds of people here. I'd be more than happy to field any calls, direct you. It's all about contacts and resources. And I could definitely, not the brightest guy at AvaGrid or UI, but I'm very resourceful.
And I should also mention too, you know, we're from UI and AvaGrid talk about this, but Eversource has all the exact same programs that we do. So if you're an Eversource customer, don't think that this doesn't apply to you. Pretty much everything we talked about here it applies to both.
So I want to thank all three of you. This has been a very comprehensive conversation. We urge all of you who are watching, if you have other questions, to follow up with Gary, Ryan, or Crystal Lee. And this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time. I want to thank you, Gary Lane, energy engineer, AvaGrid, United Illuminating, Ryan Wolf, government affairs, economic, community development specialist with UI, and of course, Crystal Lee LaHaye, president of Globele Energy. Thank all three of you for being with us. Appreciate your participation in this webinar.
Thank you,
very
Ray,
much.
very much.
We
Have a good
learned
day,
a lot.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And then
guys.
best wishes to everybody watching this webinar. We'll be posting. We've recorded this. It'll be part of our chamber, so you can refer to some of the information that we've processed here today in this conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you,
Have a good day.
guys.